Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let's have a conversation on what we can do to buy the block. So I was very inspired. Hi, Cynthia. I was very inspired by the conversation that I was having with my kids this morning. I don't know if you read my post about the conversation I had when I was taking the kids to school this morning, but I want to have a real conversation on what are some actionable steps? What are some things that we can do right now to really start investing in real estate? What are some things that we can do in order to get to a place where we're actually buying the block? How do we do that? When we talk about things like gentrification, what we got to understand, and Ti said it great. Ti is another guy that another rapper that I don't necessarily buy his music, but I really admire the things that he says and he does in the community, just like Nipsey Hussle, just like David Banner. The things that these intellectual guys are, they just have very stimulating conversations, very stimulating things that they say that are impactful. But one of the things that Ti said a couple weeks ago about gentrification is the problem is when we get money, we tend to leave the communities that we may have grown up in, and we don't want to invest back in the community. And what ends up happening is somebody else will come and see value in those communities. Then they'll start to put money into the communities, and then the values will go up. And then the people that are of the community will end up moving out. Then we get mad at the people who saw the value in the first place, and they started investing in those communities, and we've done nothing about it. And so my good friend Chandra said, if you don't have a seat at the table, you risk being on the menu. If you are not taking action in the first place, you are going to be a victim. We have to stop being reactionary and start being proactionary. We have to stop letting things happen to us, and we have to happen to things before we allow them to happen to us, guys. And so getting in position to take advantage of these opportunities, right? I mentioned this morning that like my resolve, like listening to Nipsey Hussle and people like that, my resolve is to now I want to go out and I want to put money into these neighborhoods, because not only are you changing the face of the community, you're giving value and you're giving pride to the people who live there. There's always going to be renters. There's always going to be owners. I want you to be in a position to where you are an owner and not a renter, where you are an investor and not just a consumer. So let's talk about how to do it in a very real way. What are some things that we can do right now in a very real way that can create this type of wealth so that we can start owning things? Then we ain't got to get mad when people come into the community and push you out, Oakland, when they push you out, Palo Alto, right? You guys sold your grandmama's houses, your great grandmama's houses for little to nothing. And now you're mad because they're selling for 10 times the amount that you let them go for. We have to stop being reactionary, and we have to start thinking they saw the value, you didn't. They're winning and you're not. So let's think about some things. Let's talk about it. Let's have a real discussion around what we can do so that we can start buying the block. What can we do so that we can start inheriting real estate so that we can pass it down to our children and our children's children? Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, let's get you in a house, because you can use that first house, rich dad, poor dad, as leverage to start buying multiple units. So take that first house, get the equity, buy your second house. Or like Katrina Carter says, buy yourself a multi-unit where you're living in one and you're renting out the other. You could do that with as low as 3.5% down. We have to stop thinking about, okay, now I want to buy a home. I have to buy my dream home now. You only really have to live in the house maybe 6 months, get a duplex, 6 months, dedicate 6 months to a year being in that property. And now you're using that as leverage to buy your next property. Now you've accumulated money. There's a gentleman that I used to be one of the top REO agents, brokers in the Central Valley. I used to do 300 a year, right? And so I knew all the people who were buying it up. And there was one gentleman who used to cross my path all the time. He would buy some of my properties. When he first started buying it, he was getting financing. Then he built it up a little bit more. And then years later, he had wrote an offer on one of my properties, and he sent me over his proof of funds. And I told Glenda, God damn, this dude had millions of dollars in his bank account as proof of funds, because he started with one property. He started getting financing on that one property, fixed it up, bought another one, sold it, another one. He used the equity as leverage to buy other properties. It's possible. Okay. So I want you to start thinking small terms, baby steps. Let's buy one house, or let's buy a multi-unit. Let's get in those and let's start doing it in a real way. Okay. The other thing is I want you to look at in terms of building partnerships with people. How can you start? Maybe you can get into a multi-unit, or maybe you can get into a whole apartment complex in a place where maybe the pricing is a lot lower. I'm in California, so if I want to buy a 10 unit, I'm going to pay a couple of $1 million. Well, in Stockton, I could still probably get something for under $1 million. That's great, right? But those 10 unit properties, those require more money down. So maybe you can go to somewhere in the Midwest where it's not that expensive. Maybe you can partner up with somebody, okay? And you purchase together. Maybe you guys get your tax money and you partner up and you purchase together. Here's a thing that a lot of people make the mistake of doing when they're partnering. This is very important. We don't have our contracts right. So we get into these partnerships and we have not outlined every single detail of the partnership. And so then we have this miscommunication, things don't turn out right, and then something bad happens, somebody ends up getting the short end of the stick. When you have your contract outlined, when you have your partnership established, when you do that correct, and it doesn't have to be any form, you just kind of outline how you're going to, everything's going to be 50-50, how you're going to split the funds. If somebody doesn't hold up their end of the responsibility or the bargain, what should happen? But both of you guys go all in, put a partnership together, set up a corporation. And I was inspired, really. I just had a conversation with my loan officers. I just got off the call with my loan officers, and I was telling them, hey, you really need to sit down and set up your corporation. Your corporation is a separate entity. I showed them in 5 minutes how to set up a California corporation. In 5 minutes, literally in 5 minutes, I showed them how to set up a California corporation. Set up your corporation. Get everything set up. And here's the other thing. This is what I showed them. Now, it's one thing to set up your corporation. Now, I know a lot of wealthy people who say, I'm not even gonna repeat that, but I'll tell you this: corporations are set up, or excuse me, the laws are set up for corporation owners. Okay, if you are not either, become them. They're not hard to do. Okay, so if you are a corporation or a landowner, the tax laws are set up in your favor. When they just did some tax breaks over the last year, they were set up for the corporations. That doesn't necessarily mean they're so wealthy. You have protections in place as a corporation. Okay, but you have to make sure, because your corporation is a separate entity. What does that mean? If you get sued, the corporation can still stand. If the corporation gets sued, you can still stand, right? So one does not affect the other because they are separate entities. Okay? So if you have your corporate credit and you're getting credit on the corporation, that does not affect you personally. That doesn't affect your personal debt to income ratio. In my Build Credit to Build Wealth program, I show you how to build your business credit. So once you get your corporation, I can show you how to build your business credit. Okay. The other thing about having that protection is it's important that your corporate veil isn't pierced. What does that mean? It means if you are operating as a corporation, say you're commingling your funds and something should happen and you get sued or you get audited and the IRS comes, you have to have something in place that says we operate as two totally separate entities. Okay. I have a company. I have a book, all of my corporate information. My corporation is a totally separate entity. Okay. Who is the president, the secretary, and the treasurer of Catalyst Real Estate Professionals? Constance Carter. Who has 100% of the stock in Catalyst Real Estate Professionals? Constance Carter. Who has meetings every year? I have corporate meetings with my secretary, treasurer, and president. And I have meeting notes, meeting minutes of my meetings that I've had every year. Because guess what? If the IRS ever came after me, if I was ever to get sued, I have proof that I have a separate entity because I run them separately. The bank account, I do not use it as my personal bank account. It is a totally separate entity. So when you're setting up your corporations, make sure, number one, that this is done. I can show you how to do that. You can join my coaching program. That's when I'm talking to the people that I'm coaching with. Growth, Abundance, and Overflow. Sign up today, growthandabundance.com. And we're going over all that stuff. But it's important that if we're talking about buying the block, first of all, and I always talk about this, whatever business that you decide to go into, make sure your foundation is solid. The worst thing that you can do is build anything on sinking sand. Build your foundation on a solid foundation. So before you get too big and you start doing too much, make sure your infrastructure is in place. This, again, I showed my agents how to do this in 5 minutes, how to set up your corporation. Okay. So that's important. The other thing when we talk about, Lori, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, this is exactly what I'm going to show the ladies at the Weekend of Wealth retreat. So when you walk away from the Weekend of Wealth retreat, you are going to have a corporation set up. Okay. You're going to have, so when you walk away, when you go the next day, your corporation is going to be completely set up. You're going to have the proper tax elections. You're going to have information like this to make sure that your corporate veil is protected. You're absolutely right. So thank you for reminding me about that. But I want to make sure that when we're talking about buying the block, that we're doing it in a way where our foundation is set up, but we have to start thinking in this way. Let's start small. You know, I'm so inspired by Nipsey Hussle's life, like I mentioned this morning. I was talking to my kids. Look, in fact, let me share with you when I first heard of him like a few years ago. I was so inspired because I was like, this is, you know, he looked like a young Snoop, right? He sounds very street, but he was so intelligent in that he was just like, in fact, I'm not gonna tell you what he said. I'm gonna let you listen. If
all
you
the
haven't
time,
heard it
I mean,
yourself.
you know, all that is cool for the image and all that, but all them is liabilities, you feel me? I'd rather invest in real estate, you know what I'm saying?
Wait, can you repeat that again, man? I'm an artist. What did you say you want to do?
I said invest in some assets as opposed to trick off my money on some liabilities like diamonds, you know what I'm saying? Cars that lose value, so we drop them off the lot.
So you're trying to get land.
Exactly, homie. A real asset. Take care of my people, because you know it look good, but at the end of the day, you losing value, homie. It ain't appreciating. It's depreciating. It's losing value.
What do you think? Why do you think it's so hard for people to get that message? You know, I mean, one half you get guys that say they got to impress the females. Female ain't trying to talk to you unless you blinged out. On the other hand, you got other people feel like they got to show off to the homies and impress them with their riches. I mean, what do you think is how do we get that out of that mindset?
Man, I feel like that's insecurity. Material things ain't nothing. You feel me? At the end of the day, it's who you is. You know, you wasn't born with it, you gonna die without it. So if you feel you need some diamonds or some jewelry to get out of female, it's because you feel you lack something within yourself. You know what I mean? So all that.
Anyway, I love that. So when I first heard about this man and I saw that, I seen that a few years ago and I first heard about him, I was thoroughly impressed. And I'm so impressed by just people who think outside the box, that it's not just about wearing the material, it's actually owning. It's not just about being a consumer, but being an investor. It's imperative, guys, in our community that we have more people who think like that. That way you won't be so reactionary when you get pushed out your neighborhood. You won't be so reactionary when you have to rent from somebody and you mad at everybody else. I go to Oakland and I see, you know, West Oakland looks totally different. East Oakland looks totally different. And the people who live there are mad because they did not properly position themselves to own anything. Let's change the theme in 2019. Let's let that be a lesson to how we are to move forward. Okay, we have to think about wealth creation and what it means to our community. Okay, so the information is available, it's out there. I will be teaching this at the Weekend of Wealth retreat. So you guys, if you want to change your life, I want to invite you. I see this particular retreat, and people look at it and they're like, wow, it's expensive. Yeah, it is expensive. But let me tell you something. When you walk away from this, you're going to be in a position where you don't even have to question whether it's expensive or not. You're going to be able to drop that money like that. There's some things that I be going to be $30,000, $40,000. And I'm like, this is an investment in me. Boom. I have no problem in doing that because I know that I'm my biggest investment. I'm my biggest commodity. I have people that say, you know what, Constance, I'm going to have to take out a personal loan in order to get there. And I said, I tell you what, you take out that personal loan, you'll never have to do it again because I'm going to show you better than I could tell you. In any case, I just get so passionate about this stuff because I know that the opportunities are out there, and I see that there's such a need, and it's due to a lot of inequities that have happened over the years, but there's so much opportunity, and I get really passionate about this stuff because I know that there's so much opportunity for people out there to just take advantage of. And a lot of times people don't see it until it's already too far away. There's so much out, even in Stockton. I don't want to say Stockton like that, but even in Stockton, you see stuff downtown and you're wondering, well, gosh, what? This is ground zero, guys. This is ground zero. The stuff out there is so inexpensive. You don't want it because nobody else want it. But when everybody, you want to buy when the prices have already gone up, you don't want to get it right now. You don't want to buy and hold. Now it's time to start thinking about the future. Like that gentleman that I told you about, who when he first started flipping houses, he was getting finance to do it. And then when I saw his bank statement a few years later, he had millions of dollars in there. I want that to be you. I want it to be you. Anyway, that's all I got to say. I got to go eat. I'll talk to y'all later. Glenn Owen. Oh, Lord. I do. I'm sorry. I've been eating all day. It's 1:00. So I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.